All right. Well, listen, we're going to get started on our first virtual event that we have held for Pinal Partnership, and we're really excited about it. It's a beautiful day in Pinal County. Sun is shining on us and is going to change a lot of things that are happening in our world. I think this is the first time in our lives that we've had something that has affected the whole world the way that this has. So we're looking forward to seeing the changes that are coming about within Pinal County, especially in this whole electric vehicle manufacturing side of things. It's interesting to see and to realize that there's well over 1 million electric vehicles on the road today, and what it's forecast to be by 2030. I think 18 or 20 million electric vehicles at that time. So this is going to be an exciting program. And as Jordan mentioned earlier, we did not anticipate doing this this particular meeting this way, but it's going to be fun to get to see everybody as we progress through this. There are a lot of things that are changing in our lives. We were talking, some of us earlier, about getting to walk and hike and the families that are coming together. My wife and I raise French racehorses. Actually, they're donkeys, and we call them Jackob. And so I'm getting to feed them and take care of them for the first time in a long, long time. So I get to come in early in the morning, do that, and it really kind of soothes my day as I begin the day. So we're really excited to see what is going to be the outcome of so many lives that are being touched by the virus at this time. So the breakfast this morning is being sponsored by Pinal County. Many of us have been in business in Pinal County for many, many years. We are very fortunate to have the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Anthony Smith, with us this morning. And Anthony's going to make a few remarks about the county and about his leadership within the county. Tony, are you there?
Yes, I am. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Harold, just a suggestion, if you can ask everybody to mute their phones if they're not talking.
Melissa, if you can push mute on everybody that's not a panelist, that would be great. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
I want to thank the Pinal Partnership for making this possible. So much of our focus has been on COVID-19, but let's take this morning to focus on economic development. You know, it's exciting. Pinal County is quickly becoming a model for 21st century businesses. Pinal County is at the forefront of attracting green and EV type industries. We'll give a few examples. Have solar and battery installations. We've completed 1,400 acres. We have proposed another 2,100 acres. We have the state's only ethanol plant. We have green energy biofuels plants. Looking to the future, Pinal County is in discussions with a conglomeration of foreign countries that are looking at Pinal County as a location for manufacturing a key element of the EV industry. Well, we're creating a structure and a roadmap that aids high-tech development for decades to come. Our partners at the ACA, ASU, and U of A, along with Central Arizona College, have created the Arizona Innovation and Technology Corridor. This corridor will be the home to many more businesses similar to Lucid, Nikola, Case New Holland, Tractor Supply Corporation, etc. And we have an aggressive transportation expansion program with possibly 3 interstates, the future north-south freeway, access to 3 major international airports, and with the RTA as a backbone, we're a logistic dream for many companies. Finally, with a marketing population of about 62 million people and an award-winning workforce development department, we have a very bright future. I think by 2050, Pinal County will truly be the sweet spot for businesses in Arizona. So now let's get back to Harold and hear from our panel.
Tony, thank you very much for sharing that. Your leadership has been amazing over these last years, and thank you for all that you do for the county. Much appreciated.
Been my pleasure.
Melissa and I were talking earlier. We have just been inundated with renewal of memberships, new people joining, and we're really humbled by that at this time. We were a little concerned that maybe people would drop out along the way, but I think instead they're looking to the partnership to be a voice for them. And rather than going through and reading everybody's name this morning, Melissa's going to send out the audio of the meeting, and it will also include all the new members. It'll mean more, I think, to you to be able to see those and hear those than it will if we just repeat them at this time. So we'll skip that part, and thank all of you who are here and joining us for the first time as new members. I'd like to take a moment. We had one of our founding members pass away last month, and Michael Martindale had been an integral part of so many things that happened around Pinal County in Arizona. So we want to remember Michael, and if we just take a moment of silence, and then we'll pick up with the panel at that point. Thank you. Let me just introduce the panel real quick, and we'll get going. We've got a great program today, as usual. Jackob Andersen, you have the kids in tow. St. Holdings, are the kids going to be part of the panel? Jackob, we'll find out, I guess, as we go along. Paul Hughes, Commerce Authority, is with us. Julie Pettit from Arizona Gateways Logistics. Tom Stringer from BDO Site Selection and Incentives, a very, very interesting side concept of what goes on in bringing businesses into Arizona. Glenn Williamson, Canada, Arizona Business Council. We always enjoy hearing from him. And Joseph Van Orden, ASU's Department of Supply Chain Management. And we're going to be moderated today, as usual, by Jordan Rose. Jordan?
Thank you, Harold, and thank you, Chairman Smith. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. And I want to first, think about this panel as a little bit of a break from talking the constant talk about the virus and the situation, but I also want to take it back to reality a bit and maybe start off with a question of how this virus is affecting you and your business and what you're doing today that's different from a month ago, and how you're thinking about things, because I think that's relevant to everybody, and I think it'd be helpful for everybody to think about that. So maybe we could start with our vice president of Pinal Partnership and the guy who owns all the land that has made all these electric vehicle locations happen. He's really worked hard to put these deals together, and that's Jackob Andersen. So maybe Jackob, if you could tell us what you're doing differently. You're on mute, by the way. You need to push mute. And just so everybody, while Jackob's turning on, everybody knows, if you're not familiar with this platform, go down to the bottom and you can get into a group chat, and you can send me questions, and then I can have better questions to ask these guys because they'll be from you immediately.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. Harold, thank you for the introduction, and appreciate everyone making the effort to get on this morning in your homes. And I hope everyone out there is staying safe and sticking to the stay-at-home rule. I think that's really important today. Jordan, the question about how has things affected us? I mean, we are lucky that we're involved with our industrial sector, as many of you know already. And the big adjustment we had to make initially was accommodating the new way that we're all living. We're all sitting here now on Zoom. We're all sitting working from our homes. And that adjustment caused us to have to take a few of the escrows that we're dealing with and extend them. We had no problem doing that, working with our users in tow. But the attitude of everyone that we've been with and have worked with has been incredibly good and positive. And, an industrial building, a user coming into our area doesn't just happen overnight. A lot of work goes into it with the city they're going to locate in. The county, Pinal County, works incredibly hard to accommodate them, the workforce groups, the Arizona Commerce Authority. And all of these things can be happening now. And I say this to all of you to encourage you to continue that hard work and effort in permitting, in working through incentive programs, etc. Because that work can be done now, so that when we come out, and we will come out positively on the other end of this, we come out strong and ready for business. That's what we're seeing, and I mean, we're always going gung-ho, as you know, Jordan. We always want to be ahead of the curve. We want our project to be shovel-ready. We want to be at the top of the list, as Paul Hughes knows from the ACA. We're chosen in our projects because we can deliver, and we want to make sure we can continue to deliver when we come out the other end of this. So the adjustment is accommodating the users and hand-holding them a little more so, allowing a little bit more time as everyone works through this. And of course, the Arizona Commerce Authority is swamped with helping the small businesses and all our local businesses that are here right now. We have to allow a little bit more time. And we hope that the cities and the county continue to work on the efforts of permitting and helping the users get through the process. So I think patience is important, but don't stop what you're doing, guys. That's what we say.
Thank you, Jackob. And let's go just to follow along on that. Paul from the Arizona Commerce Authority, you've been doing an amazing job. I mean, I don't know if you're posting those things on your website, but they just did a Zoom meeting for over 1,000 people. Showed up, and they talked about the SBA loan programs, and they were just very comprehensive in all the different programs that could be helpful to businesses in this time of chaos. And I really appreciated that. It was pretty amazing. So Paul, I know your life has changed dramatically in work, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when we, I think for everybody, I think what the surprise was the suddenness of everything. And speaking of the panel, we had one of the panelists that was a personal friend of mine. We got our MBAs at ASU together, and he just happened to be the CEO or CFO for Cox Communications in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. And so he had a lot of analogies that he could draw on to help here in Arizona, speak to the business owner, because there's really only a couple of mindsets you can approach something like this with. It's either you approach it with this scarcity and fear, so they scramble and panic, or there are some that see that there's an opportunity here if we can just keep our head and push through. And so we were concerned that from a pipeline standpoint of our deal flow, that we were going to see all sorts of projects cancel and drop out. And in a pipeline of around 300 projects that we have, only 2 have dropped. The rest are they just want to measure what's going on. And to me, that's the CEO mindset. You don't become a CEO by quitting quickly. And so there's this tenacity element that's in there, that some of them see that there's the potential for advantage. If you're willing to invest when everybody else is not, those tend to be the companies that do very well. And so we start to see things that seem counterintuitive. So it tells us we have more learning to do. So an example of that would be, particularly for deal announcements, this event for Arizona took the better part of March and put it on pause. And yet we still had very large project announcements, a $3 billion investment in Pinal County, making this the best single month we've ever had. So we still see deals happening, and we see some deals accelerating. So for the projects that are leaving high cost markets, they need to get out even faster now, and they need to find more practical markets to move their operations. So my personal prognostication is we're going to see more banking and finance coming to the state, and we're going to see more projects coming to the state that require a technical workforce without breaking the bank.
Paul, when you said more banking and finance, so do you mean jobs that would have been in the major, like New York City or Chicago, or coming here? And, yes. And why is that? Because of our density? Because of or what is it?
So we've got a good sized workforce here in the state, and they've already been coming. It's been kind of this quiet incursion, if you will, of banking, finance, insurance companies coming to Arizona from the Northeast. And we see some coming out of California as well. But, so when you drive around, the metropolitan area and you see State Farm, you see Nationwide Insurance is making a significant investment in North Scottsdale. So there are some really big back office operations and whatnot that are coming here. And a lot of those were coming out of New York State. And what they could do is they could get out of a high cost market like that. And they could still reduce the payroll for the people that they would be hiring, but these were still excellent wages for Arizona. And so, when you see projects coming in, the average wage is 150, 160 grand. Those are nice wages. And so we see more of that coming. And I think from the standpoint of, looking at this particular event, the hotspots are where the international terminals are. So we saw New York, we saw San Francisco, and we saw Chicago and others that have direct international connections. And I think that's going to be a new factor that, historically people have always wanted more international flights out of Phoenix, and that may become a strategic advantage if you're looking to de-risk your operations.
Great. Well, it's really interesting when you think about the things that I think Arizona has been criticized for so many years, the sprawl and these kinds of, the heat in the summer, and now they become somewhat of, and the transportation systems, and maybe they're an advantage in this particular case. So Glenn Williamson, consulate to Canada, and you've brought so many businesses here, and every single day you're working with Canadian companies to come to Arizona, and it's pretty phenomenal, and all throughout Pinal County and all of the counties in Arizona. What has changed for you over the last month, and your relationship with Canada, and how are they? Maybe you can give us some insight into our neighbors to the north and how they're dealing with this crisis.
Thank you very much, Jordan, and good morning to everybody. And I hope everybody is safe and doing what we're supposed to be doing. In regards to Canada, Canada has issues going on just like every other country around the globe. But I want to make crystal clear that the borders for supply chain are wide open. I was on the phone this morning dealing with some stuff up there. We have 450 Canadian companies here that we're polling almost every 5 days. And we are staying very, very close with them. We are yet to hear broken supply chains, so everything is operating smoothly. We are also, as the largest foreign direct investor in the state of Arizona, the banks. We've been verifying with the banks, transfer of funds, movement of money is all very, very solid. So I think that what we're paying attention to is, are there any breaches, breaks, or problems in the supply chains? Nothing so far that we have seen. Then the second thing is, how are these 450 Canadian companies operating here in the state of Arizona? And the reality is they're operating as Arizonans. Circle K, which is Canadian, is offering free donuts and coffee to police, and they're really kicking in and being part of what is transpiring. Our biggest task for the last 2 weeks is USMCA. We all talked about it for an extended period of time. Then this situation has occurred, and there are teams of us that are working very diligently to try and get this thing handled for June 1st. And that is our biggest goal right now, to make sure that the USMCA operation does move forward and get enacted correctly to helpfully de-bureaucratize some of the activities that are going on. So Jordan, to answer your question, Canada and Arizona's relationship is solid. There is medical, there is all sorts of things going back in joint ventures with people, and we're thrilled to see that. So friends, allies, and partners forever, always has been, and it will continue that way.
Glenn, is the USMCA, because of this chaos, do you think there's some threat about the rollout on June 1st, or what is your feeling on that?
Not on the US side, it's on the Canadian side, and the Mexican side is not going to be a big issue either. The Canadian side is slightly overwhelmed, and they are working on it as fast as they can.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Tom Stringer. So Tom is joining us, I think, from, where are you now? You're in a dark room in New York.
In an undisclosed location in New York.
Undisclosed. Okay. So Tom is site selection and incentives, and this is the guy who gets it done and brings the projects here to Pinal County and across the country. And we thank you for that. It's pretty amazing what you've been partnered with our county to do here. Tell us about how your particular business has changed and what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think some of the points that were made earlier are pretty relevant. To Paul's point, I think CEO mindset right now is not stop and panic. It's stop, wait, and see. We have got a sizable number of major industrial projects, and to the T, all of them are on a 3 to 6 month hiatus. And what I am not sure the rest of the country has understood this fully yet, and the repercussions, but what's happening in New York, what's happening in California is coming for you. It is going to cascade across the country in terms of work slowdown, stoppages, closed main streets, and social distancing at a level that is really going to put significant pressure on you from an unemployment standpoint. I mean, if you look at the numbers from the last kind of 2 reports over the last 2 weeks, those have been predominantly on the coasts. Those are coming for the interior of the country. And I think that that's going to play itself out through the fall. And from a project standpoint, that means, to Jackob's point, you're going to have to look for some delays, for some ways to accommodate, to allow the decision-making process to take place over the next couple of weeks and months. Most of our projects that were in the pipeline are all still a go because there is a lot of faith in the economy overall. But this is probably going to be a 12-month recession depression. And that's the word that I would use, because when you look at the sheer number of people who are going to be out of work and have to utilize the SBA program, and if you look at the return dates on the SBA program, the government's right now hoping for a therapeutic miracle. If you're looking at a June return date, keep people employed until June, and essentially we'll forgive the loans. There's some hope that's put into this and factored into this. If that does not come to pass, you're going to have to see a second stimulus, and a lot of these things that are on hold right now, well, there are going to be some decisions that are made. And those decisions are probably going to be to continue to hold and press out, and that's going to have pretty much of a lagging effect. I mean, so in our industry, what we're really focused on right now are the recovery incentives. And that's especially true for companies on the coast, but certainly companies in the interior that have seen their revenue and their employees, forced basically evaporate overnight. So the recovery programs that are out there, I think every economic developer, every business professional, every service provider has to be in the retention game right now. How do we help people stay liquid for the next 3 to 4 months? Everyone in this room, in this call, that's our charge. That's the job. Because if we don't, that recession depression is going to have much more of a significant effect than the virus itself. And I think that's what we're faced with now. So, I mean, if I can do anything here on today's call, it's to try and raise awareness of the fact that we all need to be in the retention game and to help with the liquidity crisis that's taking place right now. And I would say this too, we will come out of this. And if you look at the financial crisis, and having personal experience lived in New York City, still working in New York City, living through 9/11, guiding clients out of the morass of 9/11, the cities will recover. The urban density is something that, I'll be honest, is not going to change. I wouldn't really put too many eggs in that basket, thinking that being in a more spread out suburban environment is going to be a panacea all of a sudden. I still think you need to focus on things like workforce, on cost, on incentives, on talent and skill. Because if you don't, once this is over, this will be a problem that's forgotten, like all problems are forgotten. There was a big press in New York that no one would ever come back to Lower Manhattan after the attacks, that no one would go into a building above 10 stories again. All proved to be untrue. Same was true after the financial crisis. So this too shall pass. And I think that the businesses in the regions that focus on what makes them strong and competitive candidates outside of the virus are going to be the ones that are ready for the upswing.
Thank you, Tom. I think that's incredibly wise, and I like the statement about everybody focusing on retention and trying to figure out how to keep people employed for the next many months with the incentives that the government's providing. I mean, I know that's been a large part, I'm sure, of your job and everybody here, but I know I've worked harder than I think I've worked in my entire life over the last 2 weeks, just constant phone calls with business owners to try to figure out how to make sure we save their business. So I know everybody's having that, and I appreciate those words. It's very, very helpful, especially coming from New York. Joseph, gosh, I think you've got at the Department of Supply Chain Management at ASU, you've certainly got a huge role in making sure that these economic development projects are viable. And I just wonder, how has your thinking changed over the last month?
Good question. So, we spotted this back at the end of December and January as the international supply chains began to get these signals from China saying this was going to be a problem, right? But in the beginning, we thought it was going to be a supply problem. Well, because of the last 2 weeks, it's now turned into a demand problem. And so when Jackob talked to me about this project, I was really excited about some of the things Pinal County's doing. So the inland port, the fact that they've moved it this far along, and I think they've got the right leadership to accomplish it, is absolutely brilliant. It will take literally thousands of semis off the road between here and the port in LA, which will be great for green, but it will also decrease the cost of moving products to and from Phoenix by hundreds of dollars and for each trailer load. And so I think there's a brilliant future. But as Tom just said, what we don't know, because we've never tried this before, is shut down your whole economy for a month and can all the demand return? One other thing about electric vehicles, which I am very excited about, is that electric vehicles require us, because they're new products, right? They're new capital going into the market. Whereas I can keep my internal combustion or ICE car longer, right? If I feel like economic depressed, but if I'm going to move into an electric vehicle, that's new capital. And so I would say, we were going full steam ahead into electric vehicles if you would have asked me in January. And a lot of these projects that we're doing here in Pinal County, I was really excited about because I thought that there'd be a ton of demand for it. The question is, does that demand hold up, or will we have to put a pause on that demand for a year? I don't know that anyone has the answer to that. I think the supply chains themselves, as Glenn was saying, are in good shape. Everything that we're out of currently here in the U.S., if you give American manufacturers the go-ahead to start making stuff, you're going to have more of it than you're going to know what to do with in a few months, right? Ford said it was going to have 50,000, new breathing devices for us by June, right? New York said they needed 30,000 total. So by June, we're going to have warehouses full of product. It just takes a while for the supply chains to kind of readjust, but I think they're going to get there. I think in a few months we'll have probably more masks than we know what to do with. But in the short term, there's these shortages. But in the long term, it is, what is this depression in demand going to do to us? And I don't know that I have an answer for that. But if we can keep people liquid and keep these projects moving, I think these projects all point in the right direction. And that's what I'm excited about.
Thank you so much. That's very, very interesting. And I think we'll come back to that question about if you shut the economy down for a month or 2 months. And I want to get panelists' thoughts about that. But let me ask Julie from Arizona Gateway Logistics. You've really had such a great role with consultant and program management on foreign trade zone and all of these kinds of things. How has your business changed, or what are you thinking in the current climate?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Actually, one of the things that I'm dealing with is contingency management, because people are concerned about what to do and staying compliant, because the laws aren't going away, and staying compliant, whether they're in a foreign trade zone or whether they're just doing import and export. So I've been working on a lot of contingency planning and speaking with customs about, how can we work with organizations to make sure that they take care of their workforce, but at the same time, not step over that line of compliance. So that's been really, like you said, I've been so busy. I'm here in my house, but I'm just going nuts as far as what I have to put together. But I do see a positive outcome from this, in that a while ago, Customs had added 2 pieces of security to their protocol, which included what happens if you have a catastrophic IT failure or breach, and what do you do if you have an agriculture breach. So if you get a worm in your container, you have to have a protocol. I see this coming down the pike as well, as far as how do you deal with a pandemic or a force majeure. And I really kind of found it interesting that they didn't think about this because of the 9/11 situation, where everything stopped. Obviously, it was for a shorter period of time, but it was still catastrophic to the country as far as staying in place and not moving. I was in Virginia at the time, so it was very shaking as far as how we had to deal with things and find our new normal. And that's what I think is going to come out. Logistics is moving. Port operations is an essential activity. So the Port of Long Beach, for example, is moving. If we had, we're in a position as an inland port to have cargo move, we would still be, employed and moving cargo. So those things are still happening. Now, there's going to be, what I see is, of course, because none of the steamship lines are calling China, but they are calling the other ports. Now, as this has trickled out of China, the irony is that with the China war, a couple of, over the last year, with the increased tariffs, I've had clients who have been actively leaving China to other locations in Asia. And so we're not immediately affected by steamship lines not calling China anymore, because they had already started moving out of China. However, places like Vietnam, they're now on a national shutdown. There's going to be some lag in what's coming in, but if you look at where ships are around the world, they're still moving. So I don't think that we're going to have a complete, we're going to have holes in the supply chain, kind of an accordion effect, because as things shut down and restart, because there's going to be ramp. One of the things with China is that they not only had this pandemic situation happen, but then it was right in the middle of Chinese New Year. Well, in Chinese New Year, the supply chain always gets a little bit of shrink, because half the workforce goes back home and never comes back to work. So they always have an issue with re-ramping, but they're pretty good at that. So I think we're going to see some things start to take place. But as long as people stay positive, look for the positive opportunities that this will bring, already start to plan for the new normal, I think that we're going to come out of it stronger. Most importantly, I think Arizona is going to recover faster than it ever has before, because we were already in such a positive position, especially when you consider what's going on in Pinal County. I don't think I think that's going to be the feather in our cap, is that we're going to be able to recover faster, because our attraction has been so penetrating into states that are perhaps not business friendly, where people are starting to say, yeah, we really need to start moving. We need to figure this out, and we need to be in a place where we are able to recover faster from things like this. So that's really where I'm coming from right now.
Good. I don't know. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for that. I don't know if any of the panelists, or especially Tom, maybe you can comment on, the restart of the economy and where you think that would be, or how that would be. And then also, you are in New York. You're living through, like you said, it hit you guys first, and it's hard, and it has not hit Arizona to that extent. Do you have any advice for us, just watching what's going on from a business and health perspective?
Well, if this was 3 weeks ago, I'd say buy toilet paper. That's for sure. And alcohol, because there's quite the run at the liquor stores and beer distributors when the shutdown order came. But quite frankly, listen to your state and local authorities. That would be my first advice, and stay in if you can. Plenty of people are going to get this from all statistics that are being shared with us. And plenty of people are going to easily recover from this, but it's going to be ferocious in certain people. So you do want to make sure that you take these precautions. I mean, it's a little bit easier in a geography like the Phoenix Metro than it is in some of the denser places, but I just would caution people, don't underestimate the ferocity of this, because it's not just the elderly, it's not just pre-existing conditions. It's having a pretty profound effect across demographics, both age and health at present. So just practice good common sense and listen to your state and local leaders. And as Mom always said, wash your hands and probably behind your ears as well. I don't think that hurts at this point. But in terms of restarting the economy, I mean, that's something that I'm kind of talking to state and local officials about all over the country right now. The economy, regardless of anyone's political affiliation, was humming along pretty nicely. You know, think of it as a race car speeding down an interstate, and somebody threw a giant monkey wrench into the engine. So that doesn't end pretty. You know, that's not a nice drift over to the side of the road to change a flat tire. That's a horrific crash. And sadly, if you look at the market, you look at the job numbers, that's where we are. And for all the prognostications of a V-shaped recovery, I don't really think that that's pragmatic. If you look at just the volume of folks who attended the ACA call the other day clamoring for help with small business loans and the Paycheck Protection Program and liquidity, that tells you what a cash crunch really is and how desperate people are. If you look at the forbearances that are being passed in states like New York and California, just on bills, mortgages, utilities, public service commissions, most people in this country are almost paycheck to paycheck, and that's even for pretty good jobs, just because it's the higher cost jurisdictions, higher tax jurisdictions than elsewhere in the world. So restarting Main Street is going to be extremely painful. I mean, I'm sure you guys can drive around and look at the number of restaurants. Half those restaurants aren't going to survive. I don't think that's a bold statement. I think that's pretty conservative. So how do you get those people then to be able to pick themselves back up and get money changing hands on Main Street again? This is going to be very hard. And they're not going to be able to throw a switch and just say, hey, sports are back, the economy's back, we're all good. This is going to have to be maybe a much longer term ratcheting back up process that as the coasts maybe start to come back online, Arizona and Texas are in shutdowns. And you're living the way we are right now, maybe in May or June or July, while we're starting to come back to life again. I think that's probably a more conservative approach to it. But one thing that I have heard across the country and across industries, especially in the pharma space, especially in electronic component space, is there is going to be, when the dust settles, a significant push to reshore industries. And the jurisdictions that get themselves prepared in terms of ready sites, ready incentives, ready workforce to bring back pharma electronic component jobs are going to be prepared for a 10-year run that I think is going to be exceptional in terms of the reindustrial development of the United States. It's something that has got support on both sides of the aisle. It's got something that is now tangible. I don't think a lot of people understood offshoring until they lost their job. That's when it became real for them. Well, the concept of bringing strategic industries and strategic manufacturing back to the US resonates with 99% of Americans right now. So I think as you look to the other side of this, and I think as you position yourselves as a state and then certainly as a region and a county, you can be set up pretty well for the long run if you're focusing on some of those core industries. You've got, when we talk about, you know, electronic and electric vehicles, you've certainly got a foundation of manufacturing that's focused in on the area. To pick up components in other areas like healthcare, medical devices is not going to be that hard a leap for you when we come on the other side of this.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for that advice all around. Let's talk about that. How does Pinal County position themselves during this current situation to take to have all the advantage of these new industries that will potentially come to manufacture here in the States? Anybody who wants to talk through that, let's do
that, Jordan.
Jackob?
Yeah, I think your question is, how does Pinal County do it? I think just before we started our call, we were just chatting to Anthony Smith, Supervisor Smith, who said, it's so exciting to see everything going on and everything come to fruition from the hard work and efforts I made 10 years ago as mayor in Maricopa. And that is the answer to your question, is not how does. Pinal County's already been doing it. We've been doing it for 15 years. It took longer than we hoped and expected, but we're there to accommodate it now. And I think, I'm going to let Tom talk to the fact that we proved it with Nikola, we proved it with Lucid, we proved it with Tractor Supply Company, we proved it with the infrastructure we have in place for the big deal that's just been announced in Casa Grande, and the fact that the workforce is available, the fact that the transportation corridors have been voted on, the fact that you've got a good collaborative spirit between the county and the cities there. The infrastructure itself puts us ahead of the game in the region as a player, and I think that's the answer to it, is we are ready and we can accommodate it, and that's why no one should press the pause button right now, and they should get their permitting sorted, and they should potentially, if they're a user, if they're a developer, get the permitting sorted out and get your ability to go vertical ready.
Thank you for that. I think, Julie, maybe you can speak to the role of the foreign trade zone in Pinal County and how that could help us attract not only more electric vehicle manufacturing, but maybe some of these healthcare things that will need to be manufactured here in the States.
Absolutely. The biggest thing about foreign trade zones is the advantage it has for cash flow, because what a company does not have to outlay in duties at the port, they can hold on to that cash flow. And if they're actually, re-exporting, for example, a portion of that, then they never pay it to the government at all. So the positive cash flow is really what's going to speak to people as far as why would I want to be in a foreign trade zone? Because you get those tax advantages on the duty level. Of course, Arizona has some favorable property tax as well that we want to be sensitive to. But I think from the biggest piece is, for example, when we talk about Lucid and having lithium-ion batteries in their vehicle, those are already 3.5% duty. But if you have, then you get a Chinese adder on that. If you put them into a foreign trade zone, then you're not paying that right up front. You're paying them as you leave your facility instead of when you put them in your facility. So what I see from an Arizona advantage is that because we are FTZ friendly, because we are business friendly, that we can start to really collaborate with organizations as to how to help them with their cash flow, not only for business attraction, but for business retention. There are going to be opportunities for people that to be able to become foreign trade zones. They may not have the same tax advantage on the Arizona level, but they will still be able to take advantage of the cash flow help that they would get on the customs duty level. So I see that right now, a shift. So for example, I have a client who has distribution centers around the country, and they are actually changing their mindset to take their foreign product and put it into their foreign trade zone here in Arizona and offset that with domestic product that they're already getting to their other distribution centers. And so that they can keep the foreign trade zone healthy in Arizona, hold on to their cash, but also keeping their other distribution centers viable. And so I see an internal shift in how their distribution flow is going, and that it's offsetting whatever additional transportation costs they might have in the back half, but by using Arizona as a central hub for their international imports. and then distribute that from here.
Thank you, Julie. Glenn, let's talk a little bit about Canadian companies and their how should Pinal County be positioning themselves to attract more? And maybe you can also explain a little bit about, you mentioned the Arizona, Mexico, Canada trade new agreement and how that's going to impact us.
So I think I'd like to start with the fundamentals of why Canadians and Canadian companies invest and come to Arizona have not changed. I think Tom's comments are a great wake-up call. Thank you very much for those. I think that's a very important thing to listen to. I can tell you that I believe you are going to see something different occur. I think that we are going to get into infrastructure development that is going to come out of Washington in the form of stimulus that is going to be second to none, that we will be dealing with people going to work and dealing in construction. I think there is going to be a takeaway on this that's going to be huge. Canadian companies are already gearing up for this. I think you're going to see redistribution of Chinese companies looking at North America and setting up hubs in North America. We've already started watching this in Canada as they recognize their scenarios just aren't working properly and they cannot ignore what is going on in America, and either American companies are going to set up here completely on their own, or Chinese companies are going to come in as partners and start doing many of those things. So I think these new hubs are going to start being created. The good news for Arizona and County and Canada is we're already there. You know, as in my role with EPCOR, running EPCOR as a chairman of EPCOR, we are sitting there completely involved. As Fortis is currently running Tucson Electric Power and making sure that that is all being done. This infrastructure side of things is going to be a huge job creator. And I think that Pinal County is right on the cusp. And I take a look at the work that Jackob has been doing with his project, and you see the construction that is needed, and you see all of that. I don't think that is going away soon. And I think I'm going to counter Tom on you a bit on this one, Tom. I think you're going to see that be one of the core changes that is going to accelerate the next look at what is going to drive the US economy. I am not completely doom and gloom in any which way, shape, or form. I think the one constant in life is change. This is a horrifying change that we're going through, but there are two ways you can look at it. It's either get engaged and create the new paradigm, and look at what we're doing right now, sitting on this conference call. I don't know, Jordan, I know you do about 10 of these a day. I'm up to about 6 or 7 now, and I'm astonished at the amount of information that is being put back and forth in a condensed time frame, and people are becoming so efficient at what they're doing. Long answer.
Thank you, Glenn. And it is pretty remarkable to see those who are adapting and changing. And I think what you said, you get engaged and create a new reality. As shocking and disruptive as that is, there's opportunity there. Joseph, there was a question from Jim Mullen, which I think is really interesting, and that is, how are the universities, and particularly your university, Arizona State University, engaged in trying to model the activity and lack of activity or economic modeling that may help us with recovery? Can you talk a little bit about that, or maybe how it applies to supply chain?
Thanks. Yeah, I saw that question pop up on the chat. And I'm afraid my answer is not going to make anyone feel any better. But the problem with all modeling is it deals with data that's already happened. And so when you have something like this that is so abnormal, as they call it, the black swan event, right? There's not a lot of good data out there to say what does it look like once you go forward. And people looking at other countries that have kind of passed the wave, for example, China has been very dark as far as their data goes, hasn't been really forthcoming, but we've seen that their economy hasn't really started up well. They kind of started up well, and then they had some they've just recently had some more contraction back in Beijing as they've closed down movie theaters again. So the real answer is no one exactly knows. It's somewhere between everything's going to be awesome and everything's going to end, right? And it's somewhere in there. I'm on the positive side that I think we'll have a rough summer, and I think we will feel like we are in a depression, or not a depression, but in a a pullback all the way through fall. But I'm hopeful that that we can say that we're going back to work in fall. That would be how hopeful I am. Now, there's a lot of really smart people running a lot of computer models on this, but they change daily, and that's because we don't have a lot of good data about the past, and that's what the models are based on.
Paul, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. Paul, can you comment on what we could be doing here in Pinal County, not only to enhance our electric vehicle manufacturing and all the supply chain that might come here, but also to attract these new industries?
I think it's an excellent question, and it depends on the appetite of the community for the types of jobs that it wants to attract. A lot of the first manufacturing to move offshore was really low cost, frankly, unsophisticated manufacturing. And I don't know if that's what an electric vehicle market would want to attract. So I think it's continuing to move in the direction, to Jackob's point, not hitting the pause button on many of the initiatives that the region's already engaged in, and then thinking, how do we attract those, what kinds of companies would we want to attract here? And then what are their issues? What are their issues going to be when they come back to the US? And I mean, entirely new programs will have to be conceived out of this, because some of what's going to come back, what has to come back, will be the industries where they're strategic in nature. So you saw in the chat area where there's a specific reference to pharmaceuticals and whatnot. So if those have to come back, what sort of help are they going to need when they come back? And then how do we build the electric vehicle community to serve this this concept of the strategic reserve, right? So if there are a lot of electric vehicles out there, does there need to be a strategic reserve of batteries? So we need to be thinking a little bit differently around the industries that we're attracting and how do they fit within this strategic infrastructure.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more sort of round, and I wanted to start with Tom. Tom, I know Glenn had made some remarks about how this will come back or how this will go, and I just thought maybe an opportunity to kind of respond thoughtfully to those thoughts. Infrastructure programs, all that kind of stuff.
Sure, and we're also optimistic over the long run that we will get back to where we need to be. But Glenn's I have to disagree pretty profusely with this thought about this infrastructure renaissance taking place. If infrastructure has always been a tricky issue, it's always been the one issue Republicans and Democrats can agree on, right? In theory, yet nothing ever gets done. And it really ultimately always comes down to some way, shape, or form of local political movement with some degree of federal funding. I think that the talk, and we're very close to folks on the Hill all the time in terms of funding, is more than optimistic that there's going to be some national infrastructure package. We saw the shovel-ready jobs after the financial crisis and how the Tiger grants and things like that petered out. What states are really looking for right now, quite frankly, in the next stimulus round is going to be financial support. Our tax revenues have plummeted 30%, 40% because we've shut businesses down and have no state income tax. Or because landlords are now starting to turn around and say, my tenants aren't paying, so I'm not paying the bank, and I'm also not paying my taxes, take the building. That little bit of crisis from the financial crisis days is coming back again. So while we are optimistic, I have to tell you, putting the eggs in the basket thinking that, hey, there's going to be this national infrastructure program, an Eisenhower interstate system, or even a set of fundraising and funding support is just not likely. I think that the bulk of federal funding that's going to come out is going to be doled to the states to keep them afloat. And this is exactly what happened after the financial crisis with the support bill, that the states had to use the bulk of that money to keep workforces paid until the economy could turn itself around. Now, you saw some infrastructure develop out of that, as you'll see here again. But I think it's probably too optimistic to think that there's going to be some sort of national infrastructure panacea that's going to address this. The only thing that really will is going to be a vaccine or a cure.
Thank you, Tom. As we wrap up here, I think I'll just go around the panelists and get your thoughts. And I want to focus on opportunity, and specifically opportunity here in Pinal County for economic development, and focused on electric vehicles, but focused on really everything that we might attract. So maybe I'll start there with Joseph and go to Julie and then Glenn, and then we can Tom and Jackob.
Okay, just to be brief, I know we're at the end, but full speed ahead with the inland port, and I think that will almost be the greenest thing that we do, as far as taking the amount of semis off the road. And also it will give a green way to start shipping the cars and electric trucks that come out of those factories. And then, those who are involved in the infrastructure projects that go from that inland port area back into the greater Phoenix area, will also, as we get those roads and freeways finished, that will also be a big boom, because it will allow the workforce to flow down there. And I think if we do that, we're going to be in a good place. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Julie?
Okay, real quick, I was just going to say reshoring has been happening. I think this is going to accelerate it. And that one of the things that Pinal County can really start to look for are opportunities for the second and third tier manufacturers. Because the closer to the supply chain that the suppliers are, the quicker we are to market and the more robust of the industry we have. So for example, let's get some lithium batteries here, let's get some manufacturing going, because that's going to have far reaching effects, not just to the electric vehicles here in Pinal County, but then also around the country as more manufacturers turn to electric vehicles in their manufacturing production.
Thank you, Julie. Paul?
I think it's continuing to build support systems around the automakers that you already have. Like you've got something that is genuinely unique. And again, I want to hit on Jackob's point again, that this is not the time to pause. It's the time to continue to what you're doing and continue to leverage the supportive work that was a big part of attracting Lucid in the first place. They saw all the work around autonomous technology. So as a community, how do you embrace that? And the same is true for aerial vehicles. How do we embrace those technologies? Because all of these are neighboring and supportive industries that attract the same kind of talent, the same kind of investment, and frankly, the same kind of mindset. And so by taking advantage of the projects you already have and continuing to build layers around that, you are miles and miles ahead of many of the other communities that are looking to start with virtually nothing.
Thank you, Paul. Glenn?
So I believe that we are looking at a North American renaissance that we need to do in manufacturing and infrastructure. I believe that we need to slow down on being consumers, and we need to start making things again. This gets back to the discussion on nearshoring, and I do believe that we are going to see a lot of that occurring. The investment, there is no country like the United States globally. It's been proven over and over again that once it gets over the shock and awe of the problem and gets engaged, nobody can come anywhere close to it. And I think that the rest of the globe is going to see that occur. And I believe in our medical people that are going to solve the problem on the other side of the equation, but we can chew gum and walk at the same time.
And you're very quotable today, and you bring in a lot of optimism. We appreciate it. Tom?
I just say to Paul's point, you guys really have some assets and have developed some assets here that other folks are pretty envious about. And that's a really good thing to have. It's part of what attracted us here as we were looking on the Nikola project for the better part of several years, and you've got a very activist development community. I mean, just again to give some congratulations to Jackob and his team and what they've done. I mean, the sole reason we picked Arizona ultimately was because of the partnership between Sandra and Paul and then Jackob's teams. That's really what it came down to. We had full confidence that the state could not only envision something, but on the ground implement it. And at the end of the day, when we were looking for projects, and as we look, because we're in the market with another client right now that's looking in the similar space, when you can go to a state and you can go to a development community and you can bank on them being able to deliver and then bring something to fruition, I think that speaks volumes. That's the case study example, and Arizona's got that in droves.
Thank you, Tom. We can't thank you enough for bringing us these great projects. Thank you. Jackob.
Yeah, well, first of all, appreciate the fellow panelists and all their words of wisdom. I think I'd like to add, there's been some questions on the chat room. Lucid is moving forward. They're not slowing down. They're not stopping. Their project is in full swing. I think obviously with what's happened, there's going to be a slight pause button for Nikola, but I think we're still going to see activity from them this year, just because of the new way of working. But it's interesting, with all our hard work and effort on transportation as Pinal Partnership and as the county, some of the things we're dealing with right now are transportation related. So when we're looking at the future and the opportunities, which was your question, Jordan, I think we have already created the opportunity for a supply chain, a support system for EVs. We've already created the opportunity for the transportation world and the construction companies to locate here. We've already created a robust understanding of our workforce and where we can get our workforce from the north to from the south and from within, with 100,000 people that are out migrating to the workspace in Pima and Maricopa County. And I believe that with this current crisis that we're in, and I think it is going to be a difficult one, I hear exactly what Tom's saying. I'm grateful for his words of wisdom at the beginning and words of warning. When you have places like Singapore that have sort of said they're on the rebound and the recovery, and then suddenly they announce that they have a month shutdown again, that tells you something about this and the unknown problem that this is causing here. And I think that we're going to have that same issue here. But I think what we've got to understand is all these projects take 18 months to 2 years to come to fruition. Many people see that Nikola and Lucid and these things all happen within a 2-3 year space. We've been working on them for 5 or 6 years, guys. And so let's keep working hard. Let's keep each other company on these Zoom chats. Let's stick together as the force that we've become as Pinal Partnership and this group of people that I see on this chat room. I'm proud of us all, and I'm grateful for everyone's friendship and the leadership of the county and the cities we work with, and the ACA. And I think, and I've got to take my hat off, I think Doug Ducey, with the pressure and the stress that I can't imagine that he's under, I think he's doing a great job no matter what other people say. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jackob, and thank you, panelists. We've just had a great discussion. It was interactive and very appreciative of all your insight. I think it helped everyone that's here in the audience. We had over 150 people listening today, and we just really appreciate all of you coming out. Thanks for your insight. And Harold, I don't know if you have a couple seconds to say some words of goodbye. Thank you. And Harold, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. All right.
Yep.
Still now? How's that?
All right.
Better?
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
I think we're having a hard time with Harold's system there, but thank you, everyone. Let's find the opportunity and let's keep strong in Pinal County. Thanks. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Bye.